knowing the students, knowing the students can be taken on more than one level. You can know them individually, and that's important. You also need to know them as a cultural group, as a unit. And then there's the pedagogical, know them, like when our school administrators or others say we need to know our students, they're referring to know them in terms of their performance, their test data, their performance level. So there's different levels of knowing students. One of the first things I like to do at the beginning of the school year is get to know what my students' dreams are and what their goals are, whether they have any. Because very often they don't have any. They don't have a dream or a goal. So one of the first assignments of the year is usually for them to write me a letter of introduction. It's their writing pretest. I want to see how well they communicate in writing. And I ask them to tell me, pretend it's 10 years after graduation. Or I'll say 20 sometimes, but 10 sounds like a long time to them, so I'll tell them 10. And write a letter back to me and tell me, what have you done with your life in that 10 years since I saw you last at graduation? And from that letter, I can get a picture of, and I tell them, assume that you had, it could turn out any way you wanted. Money is no object, whatever. You could do whatever you want to do. What would your life be like if you could have it, have it your way? What would it be like? And then just let them, go with that and come back. And from those letters, I almost always find out some surprising things about students right at the beginning of the year. Who wants, when you see who wants to be a carpenter, who wants to do, and some of them, their idea of the world is very limited, so their choice of careers may be limited. But then, for example, these are 9th graders. So there are a number of careers they probably don't even know exist yet. So you got to take that into account that they're dealing with what they know. But it gives you a feel for what's important to them, where their interests are. When they start talking about where they'd like to live, how they'd like to live, whether or not the ones that mention they want to have families and the ones that want to be single and carefree. It just gives you it gives me a feel for them as persons. So I look for that first. I'm looking for them as persons. Next, I'm looking for them as students. Next, I go back, and I usually respond to the letters. That's another thing I have not done yet this year, and it's disturbing me that I haven't done, because I usually write them back. But I'm looking at the letters, and then I usually write them a little note back, just a personal note, and it's usually real short, but, dear Contrell, I really enjoyed reading your letter. I think it's great that you want to be a carpenter. Sometimes I give them suggestions, and sometimes I make connections with them to my family or my children. Or, it's just a time, an exchange. And we do that at the beginning of the year. For one thing, I want them to know that they took the time to write me a letter. I'm going to take the time to answer it, so it doesn't become something that they just do and nobody ever responds to what they actually said. They're used to teachers responding to how they said it. They're used to teachers giving them critical feedback on their writing in terms of use of language and mechanics and things like that. They're not used to you talking to them about what they actually said, though. So getting to know the students individually, that's an important part. Now, the challenge for a high school teacher, of course, is that we have so many students. And so getting to know your students individually like that may or may not be just humanly, physically possible, especially at the beginning of the year when everybody, especially if you're in a situation where all of your classes are students that you've never taught before and you don't know any of them. And I'm in a somewhat better situation here because we're such a small school. Many of, particularly my upper class students, I know them. I've taught them before, or at least I know them from being around in the building. They know me, so we're not total strangers coming into contact with each other. The 9th graders actually know me because they've seen me around the building. They know who I am. I know some of them by face, but I'm getting to know them better. But that does put me at somewhat of an advantage. But there have been years when I've had like 150 students in a day. And what I had to do in those cases was get to know some of them at a time. So instead of trying to do everybody at the beginning, I'd do like a group. Okay, I'm going to learn this group, and I'm going to learn this group. It took longer, But it was worth it at the end to finally get it. It would take me maybe some weeks to get it done, but it was worth it at the end to actually have made that personal connection, or at least attempted it. The main thing we do is talk. Just sit them down and just talk to them. I'm a big fan of word games, which is the only kind of games I allow in my room. So we'll sit down and play word games together, sometimes in a small group, and I'll let them compete against each other. So we play Scrabble. I've got Scrabble CD. Before that, I had the classroom set Scrabble boards. We've got several word games on the computer that we sit around and play with each other. We play, sometimes we'll bring, what is that game? Taboo. We'll play that, just any kind of word game. And what that does is it builds up, because it gives us a chance to kind of sort of socialize, but still be doing something educational. So we kind of get to do that. Again, because this is a small school, I work with them in different types of projects too. So I'm a club sponsor. I'm a class co-sponsor. I work on, when it comes time for homecoming, I'll be out there building the floats along with them. We work on different community and school projects together. We go on trips, so we spend a lot of time. And then many of them will see me outside of school in my other roles, because I am a pastor's wife. And so many of them will see me in the community. They'll see me at their church. They'll see me in the store. They'll see me at the bowling alley. They'll see me, different places in those other parts of my life. And all of that helps me to get to know them, and it helps them to see me as more of a person, not just this teacher that they see at school. No, if I were in an urban setting, large city, that may or may not be possible. And I would think if I were in that setting, I would have to come up with other ways to interact with the students, or create ways. I know teachers who do that, create ways to interact with them within the classroom, since I wouldn't get to interact with them outside. But since I do, I can kind of play those off one another and bounce them off.